Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Today, we began a book study of another wonderfully illuminating text by Dion, The Circuit of Force. This is what we're doing. This book is written with additional information from Gareth Knight, an associate of Dion, a student of Dion. And yeah, it's intense. It's intense in such a way that it breaks down and describes energy and how energy is used, how it's moved, and its place in the structure of magic. Before, we heard a lot about the big picture. This book helps to fill in some of the blanks as far as the up close and personal picture. So tonight we're going to do part 1, 1.1 through 1.7, and we'll kind of take bites out of this thing as we go. Hope you're having a great evening. I hope that you've been doing well. Always nice to spend some time with you learning this magic stuff. Hopefully you can hear me. Got to change the way I'm doing this just a little bit in order to avoid YouTube complications. Normally I have my phone showing my book, but apparently that's not the best way to do it. So I'm just going to read it. I've got some slides to go along with it, so that should be sufficient. But yeah, like I said, appreciate you all being here. Peace and greetings. Peace and greetings to all my favorite people in the universe. Ace in the place. Peace, peace. Monica Lawan, peace and greetings. Dr. Lakeith, peace, my friend, peace. Lady Justice, I have not read her novels yet, but I will be getting into it. Sinforma, peace. Good evening to you. Good evening, good evening. Mold Fox in the building, peace, my friend. Mo Man, peace, peace. Peace, peace. Zero, the hero, welcome. Honey Brown, peace and greetings. Killer Muddies, peace, peace. Emperor Rex, peace. Useless Familiar, peace. So let's get into it, shall we? Without further ado. Without further ado. Justin Simmons, welcome aboard. Okay, so let's get started. Serious Suit 888. Peace, my friend. Hope you've been well. Coop TGS. Welcome. Welcome. Wraith. Always appreciate you, my friend. Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. And most certainly when I'm reading those novels, I will be paying very close attention. Very close attention. Okay, so you know how we do it. Start this thing off right. What's going on with these cameras? There we go. Circuit of Force by Dion and Gareth Knight. The occult dynamics of the etheric vehicle. That's what makes this so important. Ashe to the Order of the Unicorn. Ashe to the Order of the Phoenix. Let's start with the introduction. So, between February 1939 and August 1940, Dion published a series of articles that she called The Circuit of Force in monthly installments in the Inner Light magazine. Fortunately, the series was complete by the time the magazine ceased publication as a result of wartime paper rationing. Her general theme was the recovery and practical application of what she called the lost secrets of the West. She cast her net wide, from tantric yoga to spiritualist development circles, from sexual conventions in current society to ceremonial magic. In preparing this book for publication, I have retained the sectional divisions of the original text and have given the date of the magazine issue in which each section appeared. As she almost certainly wrote most of the articles close to their time of publication, and probably in a great hurry, this dating throws an interesting light on her recent reading and writing and contemporary happenings, including the content of her weekly war letters, a selection of which I have edited under the title of Dion Fortune's The Magical Battle of Britain. All I have done, by way of editing, is to correct one or two minor errors that escaped Dion Fortune's notice in the exigencies of the time, to provide section titles for her articles, and to break down some of the longer paragraphs into shorter conventions of today. Although time has eroded some of the criticisms she had to make about contemporary moral attitudes or conditions within her group, I have foregone the temptation to add expository footnotes, as I feel neither Dion Fortune nor the intelligent reader needs any elbow jogging in this respect from me. My accompanying text is in the form of 5 commentaries of general background topics, which will, I hope, give a broad background for the many hairs that she has set running in the course of her stimulating series of articles. Together, they should make up to a serious contribution of the to the informed and responsible use of the powers of the etheric vehicle. Gareth Knight. So, as context, this information was written between February 1939 and August 1940. So, if you can imagine what was going on in the world 1939 and 1940, this is the environment and the landscape that this information was being written, that this information was being released. Not the 80s, not the 70s, not the 60s, not the 50s, not even the 40s, 1939 and 1940. It's a long time ago. So it helps to have these introductions so you can kind of know what was going on the outside. So let's get started with part 1. So the first chapter is called The Mysteries of the East and West. The Circuit of Force, part 1.1, February 1939, Dion Fortune. Zeros is way ahead of her time even these days. That's the thing, though. I don't think she's ahead of her time. I think that this type of information has always been here and been known by certain groups of people. It's just not really the type of information that is always publicly entertained. I think that this stuff comes and goes in cycles, and I don't think any of it's new. It can't be new. Like, it's hard to believe, but I think this information has always been here, and it's always been practiced and always been known by somebody at some point in time. And it's times like this, Slash said, very similar to today's world. It's time like this that this information actually breaches that veil of secrecy, that veil of, that vault. Very interesting stuff when you think about it. Stray Panther, peace and greetings. My man said this used to scare people, right? Facts. It still does. It still does. Man. I won't get into it, but it still does. So, part 1.1. Society Ejects, man. Peace and greetings. Hope you and yours are doing well. Discover the hero within. Peace, peace. Mothra, welcome, welcome, welcome. Lady Justice says, Aleister Crowley and Dion Fortune, the logos of the Aeon and the Shakti of the age. Alan Richardson, who has read this. I have not. Yeah. Okay, so this book is not written to be understood quickly. It filters, it encodes, it tests the reader. Like I said, this information has been here. It's called the occult. It's called hidden. It's called secret. Not necessarily because someone's keeping it hidden and secret. People are, but also it has its own filtering system. You have to have a mind that's conditioned to be able to utilize this information. Like, it's more than just knowing certain words. It has to impregnate your reality. These concepts, these patterns and rhythms of understanding, it has to penetrate your entire motion of living. And once it does that, then the words don't matter anymore because it becomes you and you become it. And until that point, it stays hidden. Until that point, it stays hidden. Like I said before, you're not going to find the information in a book. You're not going to find it in a video. Books and videos and stuff like that will give you words that'll help your mind to churn and process and produce. But ultimately, it takes an extended period of churning and processing and producing. And at some point, understanding will illuminate from within. It happens, but it's not. You're not going to get it from somewhere. Tonight is not a reading, it is a decoding, as it is every time, right? As it is every time. So, like I said, truth is intentionally obscured, but also it's the way that our minds are set up. As always, you can download these PDFs. But this system filters the unprepared mind. It's not confusing, it's selective. That's the difference. So, yeah, let's get to 1.1. The Mysteries of East and West, February 1939. It is not easy to convey Eastern thought to Western readers because the dictionary equivalent of the terms employed is far from being their significance in mystical thought. It is well known to those who have penetrated beyond the outer court in these matters that there is a special use of language, a double entendre, as it were, which is made use of whenever questions of practical procedure are under discussion. Lest the once born should discover the shortcuts to the secret places of the soul. You should remember in the Cosmic Doctrine when she talked about evolution and she talked about the left-hand path, and that's mainly what I believe she's referencing when she talks about these shortcuts. It's possible, but it most definitely ain't useful or appropriate. It will be observed in these pages. It is both right and necessary that... hold on. Yeah. So it is well known to those who have penetrated beyond the outer court in these matters that there is a special use of language, a double entendre, as it were, which is made use of whenever questions of practical procedure are under discussion, lest the once born should discover the shortcuts to the secret places of the soul. So in other words, like, yeah, there is language that means something on the surface level, but those who know what's really going on. And it has to be like that in order to preserve the integrity of the wisdom that's going on here. It is both right and necessary that this precaution should be used, and it will be observed in these pages. For these shortcuts are effectual psychological devices and can be made use of by the undedicated as well as the dedicated. And if they are employed by persons with unpurified and undisciplined minds, can prove unfortunate for others as well as themselves. I would be the last to deny to an adult the right to burn his own fingers if he so desires, but I think it best to withhold from him the means of raising conflagrations in other folk. Makes sense. Another difficulty in the way of conveying Eastern thought to Western readers lies in the fact that the attitude towards life of East and West is entirely different. It is strikingly illustrated by the sacred buildings in the two hemispheres. In the West, the central emblem commemorates suffering. In the East, it commemorates joy. The men and women conditioned to these emblems naturally evaluate the experiences of life differently. As Kipling truly said, the wildest dreams of Q are the facts of Kathmandu and the crimes of Clapham chased in Martaban. The best approach to Eastern thought is through a classical education. The Greek and the Hindu would have no difficulty in understanding each other. Each has the same concept of nature and the same regard for asceticism as a means to an end and not as an end in itself. Eastern thought, however, has penetrated far more deeply into natural religion than the Greeks had the capacity to do, and the mysteries of Dionysus and Ceres are but pale shadows of their Eastern prototypes. It may be not without value in this connection to examine what is known concerning the origin of the Greek mysteries. It is believed, and for the grounds for this belief, the reader may turn to the pages of Prolegomena to the Study of the Greek Religion by Jane Harrison, that when Greek national religion began to lose its hold on an increasingly enlightened people, an attempt was made, by no means unsuccessfully, to provide a rendering of it acceptable to the thinking men by borrowing the method of the Egyptian mysteries and expressing it in terms of the older, earlier Greek nature cults that preceded the highly poeticized tradition of the bright Olympians. These old nature cults still lingered in the out of the way parts of Greece, in the islands and in the mountains, and the mystery myths have shown clearly that their originators knew this fact. For in them, the god comes down from the mountains, or the goddess takes refuge in the island. It must be clearly recognized that these mystery myths are not by any means primitive material, but very sophisticated material indeed, being the work of scholars and mystics of a highly civilized era seeking in the ancient traditional roots of Greek religion for untapped springs of inspiration. It was exactly as if a modern Englishman sought inspiration from Celtic or Norse folklore. No doubt the initiates of the mysteries were regarded as pagans in their own day. There is another fact which, though known to specialists along this line of study, is unrealized by the majority of writers on mysticism and consequently by the majority of their readers. It will no doubt be a surprise to many to learn that Indian initiates believe that the inspiration of their mysteries came originally from Egypt. Ooh. The relevant data may be found in the works of Sir John Woodruff, Arthur Avalon. See in particular the extract from Panchkori Banjapadya on page 24 of volume 2 of that author's Principles of Tantra. It follows then that those who have been initiated in the Western esoteric tradition and have taken those grades that drew their inspiration from Greece and Egypt, in addition to the better known alchemical grades, will have no difficulty in understanding much in Eastern thought that is obscure or even obscene to the ordinary student. Oh, yeah. The practical applications of such teachings, valuable as they could be as a corrective to our insularity, are, however, far from easy to attain. It is frequently said that yoga, as taught in the East, is impractical in the West because the Western conditions of life are utterly unsuited to it, and the Western attitude utterly unsympathetic. I can only repeat this standard advice yet again. The student should, on no account, attempt the practical work of advanced yoga unless he has the necessary conditions of mind, body, and estate. For all these three play their part. Practical yoga should not be done in any makeshift manner, but with proper care and attention to all the material conditions that are necessary for its achievement. If these are not available, it is inadvisable to make the attempt with substitutes. Among these necessities are the necessary number of properly trained persons in a properly trained, equipped, and prepared place that is secure from profanation. Again, I emphasize that makeshifts are worse than useless. If you do yoga at all, do it under proper conditions or leave it alone. Sheesh. What a warning, huh? How many of us have done some makeshift yoga? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Zero says Sadhguru said there are sadhanas that are not attainable in society life. Oh yeah. I'm sure that there is much that hasn't trickled down the mountain. I'm sure there's much that hasn't come down the mountain for good reason. Makeshift yoga. Okay. But despite these provisos and warnings, I think it worthwhile to write on the subject of yoga because I feel that my training in the ancient mysteries of the West has given me an insight into it that the average Christian does not possess. There have been a great many books written on the subject, the writers all frankly recognizing that yoga in its original form is unsuited to the West, and one and all trying to present an adaptation of it that should be suitable. But one and all, so far as my experience goes, have thrown away the baby with the bathwater and presented a version of that ancient science, which is like a version of Hamlet edited by a rationalist who removed all reference to the supernatural. The result does not make sense. The fact, however, remains that yoga as it stands does not suit the West as it stands, and that if the mountain cannot go to Muhammad, Muhammad will have to go to the mountain. If the mountain cannot go to Muhammad, Muhammad will have to go to the mountain if he wants to enjoy the delights of a high altitude. Our Western culture has bestowed many benefits in the way of physical sanitation, but the same cannot always be said of it in regard to mental sanitation, and a modification of its attitude is due and overdue, as the psychoanalysts have long been pointing out. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and you've probably heard this in many of her writings. She says that the methods of the East are not suitable for a Western mind. It makes clean sense. We're so different. We are so different in every facet, right? From us rising out of the bed all the way to us laying back down. The traditions of the East and the traditional lifestyle of the East is far different from the West. So for us to just pick up a book on, like, real yoga from India, it has to come with some conditioning of mind, some deconditioning of mind, if we really want to understand what's trying to be conveyed. And even still, without an actual person from that culture, the best we can do is guess. That's just how it is, right? Yoga and the Tree of Life. Yoga and the Tree of Life. Chicano 22, peace and greetings. Welcome, welcome. Natural Mystic, peace, peace. Rosa Flame says, yeah, but then why would the Bihar school, for example, put out books to do-it-yourself yoga? Well, maybe maybe they've perfected a style of transmission, maybe they've attained the siddhi of being able to translate their information through text. When I read the information from the Bihar School of Yoga, I mean, for what it's worth, those have been the most clear yoga books I've ever read. I got a whole shelf of yoga books, but the only ones that I really touch are the Bihar School. Oh my goodness. What's going on? So let's get to core idea 1.2, the East versus the West. There we go. Struggling with that monster. Natural Mystic says, interesting. Was this book before internet? This book was written in 1939. 1939. So that's about 38 years after yoga was, well, after this Kundalini stuff was introduced to America. And also, this book isn't written from someone that was in America at the time. "86 years ago." Jeez. God bless you, Dion Fortune. Yoga and the Tree of Life. The Circuit of Force, parts 1.2 through 1.4. March 1939, Dion Fortune. Part 1.2. Having unburdened myself of these preliminary explanations and made my position clear, if that is ever possible in dealing with the subject of yoga, I will now endeavor to show the manner in which the Western initiate can link up his knowledge with the Eastern methods, and thereby enrich both his theory and practice. The uninitiated have no means of achieving this unification, because even were the necessary keys given to them, the necessary trained and dedicated capacity is lacking. Having no wish to cause the unenlightened to blaspheme, I will pursue the traditional method of using the language of the mysteries. Clear to those who possess the keys, obscure to those who do not. It must always be borne in mind that the clue to all these mysteries is to be sought in the tree of life. Understand the significance of the tree. Arrange the symbols you are working with in the correct manner upon it, and all is clear, and you can work out your sum. That's facts, by the way. Equate the danda with the central pillar, and the lotuses with the sephira, and the bisections of the paths thereon, and you have the necessary bilingual dictionary at your disposal, if you know how to use it. So much for the practical side of the matter, not for the philosophy. It must be realized that There are two broad types of yoga: the kind that leads on to sadhana, the higher states of consciousness, right? And the one that aims at conferring the siddhis or magical powers. Those are your two broad types of yoga. One that leads to sadhana, the higher states of consciousness, and one that aims at conferring the siddhis. One could say the same could be said about magic. All this talk about high magic and low magic, right? Right? Oh, high magic is working with angels. Low magic is working with demons. Right? Two broad types of yoga: the kind that leads on to sadhana, the higher states of consciousness, and the one that aims at conferring the siddhis or the magical powers. The kind that is exported to the West is the former, the more spiritual kind, because it is the more acceptable to the ascetic Christian ideal. Whereas the other, which is really nature worship, naked and unashamed, though it would have appealed to the Greeks, would no doubt rouse the modern analogs of King Pentheus to fury. I'm not familiar with that story, but it doesn't sound pleasant. The only place in the Western world where the siddhis are seen is in the spiritualist movement, where the circle is the undeveloped analog of the chakra. It is easy to see what happens in the circle. The component members pool their psychic forces and so provide the raw material for the phenomena. Back to back to back to back to back synchronicities. No one quite knows what they are doing, nor why they are doing it, but they find that if they do certain things, they get certain results. And if they neglect to do them, they do not get results. They also know by experience that the phenomena of greater intensity occur in the presence of certain persons, which are absent in their absence. The conclusion being reasonably drawn that some persons are more gifted by nature in these matters than others. But very little is known concerning the causation of this gift, which is either present or absent in a given individual, though the fact of its observation in every conceivable gradation, from the most powerful to the most feeble in different individuals, and its variation in strength in the same individual, point to it being a thing which ought to respond to cultivation if we understood its nature. It has often been alleged that the marvels reported of Indian yogis are achieved by means of mass hypnosis, that the yogi does not really float in the air unsupported. He lies comfortably on the ground and, by the power of his mind, causes his audience to think they see him floating in the air. I am not in a position to argue this point, having no first-hand acquaintance with yogis. I know, however, that physical phenomena in the West are highly suspect. And I know that mediums who for long have been regarded as most convincing have, with painful frequency, been shown up in the end. It may be that all non-fraudulent psychic phenomena are of the hypnotic and auto-hypnotic order. I'll read that again. It may be that all non-fraudulent psychic phenomena are of the hypnotic and auto-hypnotic order. I do not know and have no opinion on the subject, preferring to keep an open mind in the present state of my knowledge. But it is quite certain that much of the so-called supernormal is achieved by means of an applied psychology of which the West is utterly and entirely ignorant. And this, to me, is the most interesting part of it. Interesting. So what do we get out of that? What do we get out of that? Well, one major thing she said that I have highlighted here is There are two broad types of yoga, one that leads to sadhana and one that leads to siddhis. And also, it may be that all non-fraudulent psychic phenomena are of the hypnotic and auto-hypnotic order. In my experience, I think that's something that you should keep in mind, something that you should pay attention to and be aware of. You should most certainly know how to hypnotize yourself. It doesn't benefit you much to know how to hypnotize others. And also, you don't become extra skilled until you know how to do it on yourself. The Western mind always forces a literal meaning on subjective phenomena. And that's probably our greatest roadblock to understanding philosophy that comes from the East. It's part of our culture, right? But you got to remember, you don't need more knowledge. You need to be able to translate what you got. You need to be able to translate what you already have. So she told us that using this tree of life, using the glyph and the structure of the tree of life, we'd be able to kind of put together the context of other teachings. The tree of life functions not merely as a mystical diagram, but as an active translation system, bridging the symbolic language of the East with the rational framework of the West. Beeble Bomb, always good to see you. Hope you're doing very well out there. You great person, you. Lady Justice says, an occultist might publish a book before they fully realize their initiation. For example, Crowley received the Book of Law in 1904, but didn't fully understand it until 1938. Yeah, I know how that goes. That's probably the biggest reason why I haven't written anything. Because I keep expanding. And whatever notes I had, by this point, it's like, I'm so far past that now. But yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go to part 1.3. 1.3. How are you all liking this text so far? It's a lot of setup. You know, this is how she does it in her work. She sets it up as a responsible teacher, right? You got to lay down the framework and the groundwork and the train tracks before you start burning coal. Speaking of burning coal, it's almost time for me to switch the battery on this thing. Part 1.3. The word yoga itself gives us a clue to the nature of the activities it denominates. It is derived from the root yug and implies a joining, conjunction, or union. The same root appears in the words yoke and conjugal. Thus, it may be taken that yoga is a method of achieving union, and so it is generally defined. But union with what? This is where we need to be careful and precise, for we can easily go astray. Facts. It is taken for granted by the Western students of yoga who have to accept what is given them at second or third hand in the popular books on the subject, that the union aimed at is union with God. So when you think about yoga and you heard that it means union, what do you think it means, right? We've been taught that it means union with God. Have you heard anything different? I don't try to sound extra deep. I just want to know, like, what did you believe the yoga was union with? That's what I always thought. I thought it was union with your higher self, or union with the microcosm with the macrocosm, basically. But before we continue, I think there might be more of a sexual connotation. Natural Mystic says, "Great, appreciate the reader also." Thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Chicano says, "You have a whole encyclopedia on YouTube, bro. I'm still in the Travis Mates Kabbalion study." Yeah, man. I don't think I'm gonna stop either. Fuck it. But I'm glad that you're making use of this data, for sure. Jine Owo, peace and greetings. Wonderful profile pic you have there. Beeble Bomb says, "Yeah, union with the higher self, like the goal was to achieve enlightenment." Right, right, right. Zero says, "I always believe it was union with the other higher part of you, like the union of the base to the top." Yes. Lady Justice says, "The ox yoke." And didn't you mention that last time? Didn't you mention that last time? Which path is that? Which path is that? Janelle Owo says, "I thought it was about being one with the breath initially." Okay. 11:11. 11:11. There it is right there. It's a sign. Make your wish. I found out how affirmations work, you guys. Affirmations is not bullshit. Like listening to those affirmations play on your YouTube, that shit works. And I figured out how it works. It's not about believing it. It is mechanical. It is purely mechanical. Don't sleep on these elemental forces, man. Don't sleep on these elemental forces. This is the elementals are why you have synchronicities. They're also why affirmations work. It's the DDoS style imprinting. Okay, let's continue though. So what we're talking about, this union, right? Yuga, conjugal yoke. Where was I? Mothra says, "Care to elaborate on affirmations?" No, but I did give you some clues. Do you know what a DDoS attack is? Don't give up though. I'll tell you that too. So this is where we need to be careful and precise, for we can easily go astray. It is taken for granted by the Western students of yoga, who have to accept what is given to them at second and third hand in the popular books on the subject, that the union aimed at is union with God. This, I think, would be agreed by all the schools of yoga. But what the Western student does not realize is that the Hindu recognizes not more than one God, but more than one aspect of God, and more than one aspect of God's being. Thus, the union aimed at by the devotee may be with God as the great unmanifest, or it may be with God made manifest in nature. This latter aspect of the Godhead is indicated in the Eastern thought as the goddess, the spouse of God, the Shakti, or the female aspect of the Godhead. So right now she's dropping seeds as to what this whole thing is about, what this whole text is about. The goddess. When you think of a circuit of force, when you think of a circuit, what is a circuit? How does a circuit work? While we talking about union and yoga, this latter aspect of the Godhead is indicated in Eastern thought as the goddess, the spouse of God, the Shakti, or female aspect of the Godhead. This idea is not as alien to Western thought as the uninformed might think. For as MacGregor Mathers points out in his introductory essay to his translation of the Kabbalah Unveiled, the word Elohim is a feminine noun with a masculine plural termination. This teaching, at first sight crudely anthropomorphic, indicates, when understood in its deeper mystical sense, which is the only sense in which it can be understood, that the universe is strung between two poles of manifestation in the form of a magnetic field of interacting force. That's the whole book right there. This teaching, at first sight crudely anthropomorphic, indicates, when understood in its deeper mystical sense, which is the only sense in which it can be understood, that the universe is strung between two poles of manifestation in the form of a magnetic field of interacting force. And there's our first very long Dion Fortune sentence that she loves to give us. Let it be remembered that the term anthropomorphic is a two-edged sword, and that if God is conceived of under the symbol of man, it is only because man is made in the image and likeness of God. Moreover, and this is an important clue, it was the Elohim who are reported as responsible for the act of creation recorded in the first chapter of Genesis, and created everything male and female, and ended the act by saying, let us create man in our image and likeness. Male and female he created, he, them. Here we see clearly indicated the primary esoteric idea that manifestation always takes place by means of pairs of opposites. In this case, symbolized as male and female. In fact, the prevalence of the use of the sexual symbolism has bewildered many students who have sought to go to the fountainhead in this field of study. She has to use fountainhead in the first chapter of all her books, don't she? In fact, the prevalence of the use of the sexual symbolism has bewildered many students who have sought to go to the fountainhead in this field of study. Since it is there, however, and unavoidable, we must accept it and make the best of it, though not necessarily taking it at face value. We meet the same symbolism in the Greek, the Egyptian, the Norse, and the Celtic pantheons. In fact, we meet with it wherever men look upon nature as the manifesting Godhead, and as such hold it holy, and also, by implication, esteem the corresponding factors in themselves to be holy. This is an attitude so different from that of the average Westerner, who is Christian in outlook, even if not in action, and who has been taught to worship God in his aspect of the unmanifest only, that he has no concept at all of what is meant, but at the same time disagrees with it utterly. That sounds like a typical Christian, don't it? Believing that to be sinful, which the East believes to be sacred. I'll read that again. This is an attitude so different from that of the average Westerner, who is Christian in outlook, even if not in action, and who has been taught to worship God in his aspect of the unmanifest only, that he has no concept at all of what is meant, but at the same time disagrees with it utterly, believing that to be sinful, which the East believes to be sacred. If the East regarded it as the West regards it, it would undoubtedly be sinful. But this is exactly what the East does not do. It may be said in brief that it is impossible for anyone who is at war with himself to practice yoga. He must follow the example of the great Roman who said, I reckon nothing human alien to me. Neat. Neat. Symbol is the language of consciousness. Symbols are the algebra for the soul. Not decoration, not metaphor. Functional. Functional. Ghetto Physics 777. Peace and greetings, my friend. Peace and greetings. Interesting. Yeah, that's a line right there too. Mothra says an exclusively male religion is halfway to atheism. Dion Fortune. Yeah, being raised, you never think that it's bizarre that there is no goddess in these types of religions over here. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Where's the mom at? Who gave birth to the son? Who breastfed the son? A ghost? The Holy Ghost. That's diabolical when you think about it. That is diabolical. I mean, like, I get it from the esoteric perspective. Trust me, I do. But everybody's not esoteric. So the basic person is seeing Father, Son, and at least the ghost is holy. Shit, at least it's holy. Where's Mama at? Where's Mama at? I always thought that it's amazing the stuff that you learn and you look back and wonder why you never really question some of this. Oh, my battery is about to die. Let me go ahead and change that. But yeah, it is absolutely bewildering at the stuff that I've never questioned. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But it also goes deeper than surface level. Now, don't get it twisted, because you got to think the conquest of Mother Nature, the conquest of Prakriti, that has always been the manifest masculine urge to conquer the feminine. Conquer is as above, so below, right? Because we're not just talking about humans, we're talking about energy, magnetic versus the electric. Hakma, right? Hakma bursts forth, doesn't it? Hakma shoots out, explodes. And what does Bina do? Bina catches all that. And from one perspective, it looks as if Bina is weak and dominated and submissive. That's what it looks like, right? But in truth, Bina is a bottomless pit, a black hole. Hakma will give up before Bina stops taking. Hakma will become exhausted before Bina stops being that black hole. So it's also perspective, and it's a matter of time, which means it's a matter of cycles. There's a dance. There's a dance between electric and magnetic. There's a dance between masculine and feminine. Just like what was learned in the cosmic doctrine, the wheels keep turning. They keep flipping. So it's never one. Well, it is one when you zoom out, but in the thick of it, you only see one side at a time. But understand, don't get it twisted. Let me switch this battery. Give me just a moment, please. But yeah, I said all that to say about perhaps the removal of the divine feminine from Abrahamic religions is subconscious or subtle or just diabolical attempt to further conquer the feminine nature of reality itself, not just people, but of reality itself. And I can say that with some confidence because look at where it's gotten us. Poor Mother Earth has been raped for thousands of years of everything she's got. But I tell you what, like I said, the feminine aspect, there's no end. There's no end. The masculine aspect will become exhausted before the feminine aspect. So it's only a matter of time, right? Just like in those movies that show like the end of the world and the buildings are crumbling and shit and the cars are all just parked on the side of the road beat up and you see the vines and the trees and the grass growing all through them, right? Trees and plants will burst forth out of the concrete, right? You may rule now, but you won't rule forever. That's what the feminine says to the masculine. Eventually, Hawkma is swallowed up completely by Bina, becomes completely trapped, and continues to become squeezed tighter and tighter until that free and boundless energy is now incarnate into the manifest dimension and doesn't know how to get out. Man, but we was kings. There we go. Polarity. Okay, back to the text. Back to the text. Where are we at? 1.4. That's where we are. Part 1.4. Well, I mean, look at where she's coming from with this yoga stuff. The tantric practice, it's definitely a sexual centric thing. So possibly the best. Hell, I don't know. Maybe you're right. I don't know. It was 86 years ago. I'm trying to explain it away. So part 1.4. It is agreed by all who have practical experience in this field that the things of the higher mysticism can only be conceived of by means of symbols, a sort of algebra of the soul, and the processes of yoga are no exception to this truth. By means of symbolism, they are conceived of and handled. The comprehensive glyph in the east, corresponding to the tree of life in the west, is of a man seated cross legged in meditation with the seven lotuses or chakras displayed as seven discs placed one above the other up the central line of the body. The basal one approximately corresponding with the base of the spine, and the highest one situated immediately over the head, thus entirely agreeing with the allocation of the central pillar of the tree of life, providing the intersections of the paths are added to the Sephirah. That these lotuses or chakras, and the nerves connecting them actually exist anatomically, no initiated yogi believes. But experience proves that there are centers and channels of magnetic energy in the etheric double that can be located by using the indicated points in the physical body as markers. The practitioner of this method visualizes in his imagination not his physical body, but his etheric double. You know that, right? You know that when you're meditating, visualizing, or doing your ritual work, it's done with your etheric double, right? Or are you still waiting for lightning bolts to zap out of your fingertips, your physical fingertips? The practitioner of this method visualizes in his imagination not his physical body, but his etheric double. And where he concentrates his attention, the magnetic force flows and concentrates itself. As these centers roughly correspond to the endocrine organs, far-reaching physical implications may be surmised. Certainly, there must be changes in the blood as one or another of the ductless glands is stimulated into pouring out its secretions. We probably have here the secret of rejuvenation. How many people are still doing your chakra cleansing meditations? We still doing that? Or is that fad over with? Because isn't that something, right? There are these ductless glands that do secrete chemicals and substances and elixirs into our blood that can vivify and restore and literally change your chemistry. And those glands can be stimulated by meditating on them. Isn't that wild? You can literally change your chemistry by meditating, by visualizing, by thinking about your energy body and colors and wheels of force. You can manipulate your chemistry by doing that, literally. Are we still doing our chakra meditations? She said, we probably have here the secret of rejuvenation. These different chakras or centers are held to correspond to different levels of consciousness and the corresponding planes of manifestation. This is taught in the Kabbalah at any rate, and reasoning by analogy, I presume it to be the same in the East, and that if a given center is awake and functioning, it will form a channel of ingress or egress onto the corresponding inner plane. So hold on a minute now. Not only are you changing your body chemistry, but you're also manipulating the relationship between your energy bodies, the relationship between your vehicles, physical body, etheric body, astral body, mental body. This does not sound like a small thing. This sounds like a major thing. Hmm. Hmm. So the Muladhara at the base of the spine, right? For if you don't know, that's the root chakra. the Muladhara, at the base of the spine, is held to be the basal chakra of all, from whence the slumbering force of Kundalini is called up, and that it is by that force and that alone that all the other chakras are vivified. With this, the Kabbalists would agree, equating the Muladhara lotus with the Sephirah Malkuth, which, be it remembered, is not the physical earth, but the sphere of the elements. Don't sleep on these elemental forces. The sphere of the elements, that's what Malkuth is. And therein is an important key to Kabbalistic thought. Oh, that's a good one right there. Lady Justice says the middle pillar was not a practice when she wrote this. Or maybe we could say it wasn't a public practice, right? Ghetto Physics says drawing in to draw out. Right, because where else is it coming from, right? It isn't coming from Santa Claus, Easter Bunny. Everything that happens to you is of some byproduct of where you've directed your consciousness. Everything, for better or for worse, where you have directed your consciousness, it's a byproduct. Lovely. Malkuth, the sphere of the elements. Bearing in mind the fact that the microcosm is the mirror of the macrocosm, let us remember that there must be a sphere of the elements in man, and that it is not his physical body that is his Malkuth, but his etheric double. These elemental forces, man. Your environment that you live in is a part of you. It's a part of you. And it responds to you. You have a relationship with it. This really clicked and became clear to me in the cosmic doctrine, and it was really first enlightened to me through Manly P. Hall when we were reading what was it? Nature's Finer Forces. It's over there. I don't remember the title, but Unseen Forces, that's what it was. And he talked about these elemental forces. It's unseen forces. Thank you, Chicano 22. So your environment, right? He posited the idea to me that everything around you is an echo of a push that you first emitted. I mean, technically you and your personality is an echo of another push, but just for where we are, everything around you is an echo of what you've put out. And it's a feedback loop. It keeps bouncing back and you keep reinforcing it to the point that most of the things that happen in your life are a result of autopilot, an autopilot that you set in motion. In the cosmic doctrine, Dion Fortune mentioned something about how there's even a level of consciousness, right? Just like how your body, how everything has layers of consciousness from the dense to the most subtle. And that most subtle is the most purified, the most sattvic. Well, there's even a sattvic aspect of these elemental forces. That's why we have elemental kings. That's why there's an elemental hierarchy. The most sattvic aspect of your environment has a consciousness that interacts with you. Well, you interact with it, I should say. It responds to you. And we give our environment life. We give it life. We tell it what to do. And I'm telling you, this is why you have synchronicities and you have chance meetings and you have your magic manifest and you say your prayers and you hope the angels are listening. Well, those angels that you're praying to are the elemental forces in your environment. And if you move those chess pieces just right, they'll move something for you on your behalf. God did his thing and went to sleep a long time ago. On the seventh day, he rested. How many days has it been since? He been resting since the 7th day. We on day 45 trillion. And he went to sleep on day 7. So God ain't doing nothing. God ain't doing nothing whatsoever. He been meditating since the 7th day of all existence. Right? So when we close our eyes and we pray and we put our hands together and we ask and we beg, that ain't getting to God. God probably don't even know we exist, man. God probably don't even know we exist. He created somebody else to handle that shit. And so it is, right? So it is. That's not something to be sad or mad or confused or scared about. It's Kether ain't doing nothing. Shiva ain't doing nothing. And God rested on the 7th day. Right? So what I'm getting at here is our interaction is largely with ourselves, and it's with our environment. God literally put us here to handle the business. What are we doing begging God? Begging, please, please, Lord, if you could just, he sleep. He been sleep. Deep sleep. I don't know. But anyways, it's these elemental forces that we are largely dealing with. And what we give them, they give us back. This is why you need to get your shadow work done. This is why you need to get your self-talk in order. This is why you got to get your emotions in line. This is why you have to fix that inner dialogue and all that stuff, because all of that is echoing out. Upper management, exactly. I want to speak to the manager. We don't have the credentials for that. Starline says, with all the deep gnosis you have, Trev, how do you keep your ego from being power hungry? Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. For what? There's nothing. For what? What am I gonna get? What am I gonna get? What is there to benefit? In my mind, there is nothing in this world that is worth doing anything other than what I'm already doing. Getting some stuff I already had before, just at a different level. Like at some point, you just gotta see the world as it is, man. It's just ideas, and projections, patterns and projections, and that nothing matters. Nothing matters. To answer your question, man, I don't care. I don't care about nothing except what Dion Fortune talking about, really, or what's going on in my meditations, and how to not suffer, so I can go ahead and get up out of here. Lady Justice says the root can be seen as infrared, the crown as ultraviolet in terms of light perspective. Lamed, the ox goad, would then be a bridge unifying the beginning and the end of the light spectrum. Now that's an interesting take, right? Because when we think about our visible range, our visible color range, that doesn't mean that there's no colors beyond that. That's just the range that we can experience within. But yeah. The Ouroboros, the Malkuth of Kether. The Malkuth of one tree is the Kether of another. Type shit. Hostile Hyperborean. Peace. I remember running through Dion's works. She's at best intermediate. Any Freemasons in the chat? At best. It's all projection, man. Interesting paradox perspective. The highest power wants nothing. It's already everything. Interesting. Meaning, right? You are the meaning maker. I don't have the magician card out right now, but that's the power of the magician card. You are the meaning maker. You cast the meaning. So I mean, like, what means anything? You give the definition. You control the context. You are already what you're chasing. You're already what you're chasing. All right. So we were talking about Muladhara. We were talking about these elemental forces. We were talking about how Malkuth is not the physical plane. Let's read what she said there to pick back up exactly what the text says. With this, the Kabbalists would agree, equating the Muladhara lotus with the Sephirah Malkuth, which, be it remembered, is not the physical earth, but the sphere of the elements. And therein is an important key to Kabbalistic thought. Bearing in mind the fact that the microcosm is the mirror of the macrocosm, let us remember that there must be a sphere of the elements in man, and that it is not his physical body that is his Malkuth. It's not your physical body that's your Malkuth, but his etheric double. We must therefore look for four elemental factors in man. And I use the term generically, to include woman also. These four factors being, like the elements, two of them active, a subtle and a dense, and two of them passive, a subtle and a dense. From this fact, we deduce the law of alternating polarity, both up the planes and in function. This equates with the Eastern Ida and Pingala, the sun and the moon forces, and everything that is taught in yoga with regard to Ida and Pingala can be applied to the law of alternating polarity. It has truly been said that the perfect marriage does not consist of the halves of a single whole, but of the four quarters. So, manifestation happens through interaction, not intention alone. Remember that, right? Remember that. Intention is something for sure. Intent gives you a direction, but it doesn't pull the trigger. Like this is simple. This is like easy and basic, and you're probably like, oh, I already know that. Yes, but to remember it in the moment, to actually do the thing that you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it, that's a different story. Manifestation happens through interaction, not intention alone. Even when I'm talking about these elemental forces of your environment that respond to you, they don't respond to your intentions, they respond to your behavior, your emotional behavior, mental behavior, etc., etc. The polarities in action, right? Sushumna, that's the central pillar that we're, well, in yoga, the attention is placed on unifying the system so that the Sushumna pillar can be clear enough for that Kundalini to shoot on up. Not so much something that you can directly instigate, but it's more something that you prepare for. It's something that you can practice and practice and practice to prepare for. Mercy and severity. Mercy and severity. Interaction. Interaction. Right, exactly. Thank you, Starline. That gives me encouragement to keep doing it. For the culture. Peace, peace. Welcome, welcome to this live stream. Welcome back. Hostile Hyperborn says Rudolf Steiner, specifically his esoteric lessons, but this will, of course, take much preliminary reading to grasp his cosmology. All right, well, let's continue. The Monkey House, because we're all familiar with this place. The Monkey House, the overcrowded Monkey House, part 1.5. How we doing? Y'all still awake? Y'all still awake? I'm running on 2 days being awake, so I had to go grab me something potent, something a little bit stronger than coffee. The Circuit of Force, part 1.5 through 1.7, April 1939, Dion Fortune. Part 1.5. For the further understanding of our subject, we must remember that just as the physical body builds itself up out of the inert substances of the physical plane, so each of the subtler bodies renews its substance from the corresponding level of the subtler planes. There is a constant, subtle psychic metabolism going on, a constant in-breathing and out-breathing on every plane. If this is impeded, the corresponding level of being becomes unhealthy. In other words, if that flow is blocked, interrupted, disrupted, dis-ease is sure to follow, right? Hell yeah, man. That's what I love to hear. Zero says, I am awakened and excited because this book is really exciting for me. It's giving me a lot of understanding. I mean, anytime I read her work specifically, man, specifically to me, Dion Fortune is the one. The one. Now, somebody else might say different, right? Somebody else might say Rudolf Steiner or Franz Barden, right? All teachers of the same science. Either way, I dig it. And I'm going to keep digging it till I can't dig it no more. Because Hakma will be exhausted before Bina. I tell you that. Tell you that much. Okay, so for the further understanding of our subject, we must remember that just as the physical body builds itself up out of the inert substances of the physical plane, so each of the subtler bodies renews its substance from the corresponding level of the subtler planes. There is a constant subtle psychic metabolism going on, a constant in-breathing and out-breathing on every plane. If this is impeded, the corresponding level of being becomes unhealthy. If it is entirely cut off, that level dies, and the levels below it are cut off from the central directing guidance. This no doubt accounts for certain forms of insanity. I can see that. This in-breathing and out-breathing appears to be readily susceptible to regulation by the mind. It is, in fact, normally controlled by the mental attitude. This unquestionably explains the forms of psychoneurosis attributable to what Freud calls repression, but which might equally aptly be termed constriction. For self repressive mental attitude undoubtedly restricts the subtle bodies, just as the old fashioned wasp waisted corsets restricted all the vital activities of their proud victims and produced the vapors, fainting fits, and green sickness, nowadays never seen owing to the acceptance by fashion of the natural waistline. Could we be brought to accept the natural attitude of the mind towards nature and its processes? We should soon see the last of our mental and emotional anemias, rickets and scurvy. Hmm. A well known writer once stated that when he looked upon the monkeys at the zoo in their old cages, he thought them the nastiest of created beings. But when he saw them after they had been transferred to their new home on the open air terraces, he revised his opinion. The same might be said of the civilized man's subconscious mind, explored with such thoroughness by the psychoanalytical schools of thought. Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's one thing that I like to say, right? I think that the potential of humanity is amazing, beautiful. It's worth it all. But the actuality of humanity is hot trash. But the potential is always there, right? Those dirty monkeys in the cage, of course, you're going to say that that's gross. But then you take those dirty monkeys and to their new habitat where they're able to be what they're meant to be. Now you're seeing something beautiful. Mm, I like that metaphor. She said the same might be said of the civilized man's subconscious mind, explored with such thoroughness by the psychoanalytical schools of thought. Dr. Trotter, in his epoch making book on the instincts of the herd in peace and war, remarks that the Freudians seem altogether too ready to accept the present repressive conditions of emotional life as standard and unalterable, and to direct all their patients to the procustes. Pro, mm, I don't know what that word is. Procustis? All right. If I see a word that I don't know, gotta look it up. Got to look it up. Pro Procustis. See you. All right, what's that mean? Procustis. In Greek mythology, Procustis, also known as Prokopatos, Damastus, or Polypemon, was a rogue smith and bandit from Attica who attacked people by stretching them or cutting off their legs so as to force them to fit the size of an iron bed. The word procrustean is thus used by analogy to describe, for example, situations where an arbitrary standard is used to measure success, while completely disregarding obvious harm that results from the effort. Okay. An arbitrary standard is used to measure success while completely disregarding the obvious harm. Okay, so yeah, like what she said about those corsets, right? Um, she said that the women will wear these super tight corsets. What you call it, wasp waisted, and it would squeeze, the soft guts that are in that part of the body, and that would cause physical harm. But you know, beauty, right? You have to conform to the standards of beauty. Makes sense. Let's read that again. So, Dr. Trotter, in his epoch making book on the instincts of the herd in peace and war, remarks that the Freudians seem altogether too ready to accept the present repressive conditions of emotional life as standard and unalterable, and to direct all their patients to the procustus bed of custom and convention. And no one seems to be found bold enough to put on trial the conditions that give rise to so much mental and social misery and inquire whether they are inevitable and unalterable. One has only to wade through the case histories in the 4 stout volumes of Havelock Ellis' Psychology of Sex to realize that one is studying the natural history of an overcrowded monkey house. Our purpose, however, is not at the moment to study the remedial possibilities offered by yoga to sick minds, though this is a very fruitful field awaiting exploration. I want here to consider the possibilities of yoga for the development of normal minds into super minds. For just as Freud found that the study of pathological mental processes threw light on normal ones, as might be expected in our caged monkey house of civilization, so we may find that the study of the methods of training that develop supernormal minds may throw light on the healing of abnormal ones. Good, good. So the core idea here: modern society distorts the mind. The structures of modern civilization, its institutions, media, societal norms, and reward systems do not cultivate the natural mind. They distort it, they redirect it, and ultimately suppress its native capacity for independent perception. Deletion, distortion, and generalization. How the distortion operates. Social conformity, the pressure to align with collective norms, overrides individual perception. Many of us have gone through years of that, right? Conditioning, repeated patterns of reward and punishment shape thought before awareness develops. So that's happening on the animal level. And finally, repression. Natural impulses and instincts are suppressed rather than integrated. You're not thinking freely, you're thinking collectively. That's my question about free will, right? When people ask, do we have free will? Well, you have to analyze, because sure, you can do and think and say what you want, but where does the want come from? Where does the want come from? There's a lot of conditioning that's happening, right? Chicano 22 says the first is a fake soul group or herd mentality, which is needed. I can see how one can stay there who don't want to be accepted. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a level. It's a necessary, like you said, it's needed. It's part of the system, and it's necessary for the system to function without chaos. To be expected. To be expected. Now let's go to 1.6. 1.6. First and foremost, it must be realized that Just as an unnatural attitude towards life is the basic cause of the functional psychopathologies, so a similar attitude renders the development of the mind by yoga quite impossible. Because the energies that are to produce the development are drawn from the Sephra Malkuth, the sphere of the elements, the four-petaled lotus. I'll read that again. First and foremost, it must be realized that just as an unnatural attitude towards life is the basic cause of the functional psychopathologies, so a similar attitude renders the development of the mind by yoga quite impossible. Because the energies that are to produce the development are drawn from the Sephira Malkuth, the sphere of the elements, the four-petaled Muladhara lotus. I like that comparison she made a little bit earlier, saying that just as the Muladhara, the root chakra, is the very force that activates and vivifies and fuels the other six chakra, well, the other five chakra above it. In the same way, Malkuth has a relationship to these other Sephirah above it. Inhibit life at this level by a repressive attitude, and the Kundalini cannot rise. Let life flow freely, and the way opens for the sublimation of Kundalini. Man, however, being essentially a social animal, incapable of existing alone, and suffering severe discomfort from the disapproval of his fellows, it follows that direct action in the way of a return to nature is not always possible. Compromises have to be made. Alternative routes have to be found because the cost of direct action is too high. The rent is too damn high. Realm Lilith, peace and greetings. Welcome, welcome. Coop TGS says, this reminds me of that part in the Cosmic Doctrine about the inhibited will. Yeah. I remember. Once the clouds are off the soul, many forms of compromise become possible, which make life livable when otherwise it would be unbearable. It is possible to twist a rope, and quite a satisfactory rope, out of a number of short strands. And where all the factors necessary to a balanced diet do not exist in one dish, to avail oneself of the psychological equivalent of dietary supplements. That's a nice metaphor, too. I'll read that again. Once the clouds are off the soul, many forms of compromise become possible. Many forms of compromise become possible, which make life livable when otherwise it would be unbearable. It is possible to twist a rope, and quite a satisfactory rope, out of a number of short strands. And where all the factors necessary to a balanced diet do not exist in one dish, to avail oneself of the psychological equivalent of dietary supplements. The most effective and practical alternative route for the bypassing of direct action is to be found in ritual performed with knowledge. The most effective and practical alternative route for the bypassing of direct action is to be found in ritual performed with knowledge, wherein each member of the ritual team works with the true magical power, knowing the meaning of the symbols employed, and that the personal forces of each officiant have to act siphon-like for the bringing through of the corresponding cosmic forces. This being achieved with genuine power and understanding by those working the ritual. The onlookers can participate each according to his or her need if they have the necessary knowledge. And even if, from force of circumstances, this must be withheld, nevertheless, they are not sent empty away, for the ritual, couched in terms of primordial symbolism, speaks to their condition. Hmm. Hmm. In the East, the home of yoga, in addition to the meditations on the chakras, there are the rituals of the chakras. So we got meditations on the chakras and we have rituals on the chakras. In the West, these are represented by the mystery rites of such centers as Eleusis and Memphis, and the same factors, unrecognized and imperfectly realized, come out in the modern ballroom dancing. Oh, interesting. Were the psychology of these things understood and their technique adapted to modern needs, we should have a most valuable contribution to the armamentarium of psychotherapy as well as a calisthenics of the mind. Hmm. So, repression blocks energy flow. Repression blocks energy flow. When natural energy is suppressed rather than directed, it does not disappear. It accumulates, it distorts, and eventually it disrupts the etheric vehicle from within. Consequences of repression. Suppressed emotion, unprocessed feelings become internal blockages, hindering natural expression. Stagnant energy, the blockage leads to buildup of unreleased psychic energy, creating inertia. No upward movement. The natural evolutionary impulse is halted, preventing personal and spiritual growth. Whoa, you have to do ritual? Not only that, she said the most effective and practical alternative route for the bypassing of direct action is to be found in ritual performed with knowledge. With knowledge. That was the key right there. Because technically, everything you do is a ritual. But ritual with knowledge is what makes it special. Ritual with knowledge. Starline says, so no chaos magic, lol. Well, I mean, how are you defining chaos magic, right? Because chaos magic is sort of like an umbrella term for a framework of understanding. And within that framework of understanding, there are potential rituals. Absolutely, there are potential rituals. But honestly, you have a ritual to keep your teeth shiny and white every morning. And if you do that ritual with knowledge, you might have better results than if you just did it mechanically. But are we calling that magic? Is it does the ritual make it magic? Or does the magic make it a ritual? Hey, look, we're going to do something just a little bit different. If you like these book studies, right? If you enjoy this type of content, click that link right there after this live stream. It's a link to my website. You can chat and talk about this particular content. Just a little continuation of the understanding of this information in between these live streams. I think it might be a good idea to try. if you think that it would be as well, join that link to my website. We'll see if we can get some conversations going about this information. Ways to make this stuff practical instead of just easy listening. Click the link. It's free. It's also in the description if you can't click it. Brushing your teeth with Harataki. Whew, man, that's not for the weak. I'll tell you that. That's not for the weak. I still have a whole bag of that stuff, man. Oh, I used to hate that, man. I used to hate that. Lady Justice says art can be ritual. Absolutely, right? Hell, this live stream is a ritual. Did you guys see the Super Bowl halftime? They did a ritual. They're doing a ritual on us. Everything is a ritual, man. Seriously and sarcastically. But what makes it? What makes it that? So, this current of force, remember, blocked emotion. She's telling us this early on before we even get into the technicalities. Blocked emotion equals blocked current. Blocked. Highlighting in a book is a Jedi ritual. Hell yeah. I used to highlight the sentence from the end to the beginning because I figured it'll be easier for my subconscious mind to remember it in reverse. I'm not so sure if that worked. So I think all of us are familiar with what happens when the current is blocked. Trauma loops, repeating cycles of past wounds over and over, preventing release, preventing growth. There's also burnout, profound exhaustion from sustained internal resistance, and unexpressed etheric energy. That's terrible. Unexpressed energy. So it's always there trying to come out and it doesn't have an outlet. Then, of course, inconsistent results. Efforts yield unpredictable outcomes due to underlying energetic imbalance and distortion. So she mentioned ritual. She mentioned that ritual with knowledge is somewhat of a shortcut, or I should say an alternative route for the bypassing of direct action. Speaking of highlight, I didn't highlight that sentence, but I am now. That's a good one. The most effective and practical alternative route for the bypassing of direct action is to be found in ritual performed with knowledge. All right, let's continue. 1.7. 1.7. Ace says, my whole goal is to concentrate my perception of all the necessary mundane tasks that must be done. Conscious ritual all day, every day. Being aware in the moment. Very useful and appropriate thing. Part 1.7, and this will be the last one before we call it an evening. From the practical point of view, however, the matter is far from simple in Western countries, where such things receive neither acknowledgement nor sympathy. How then can the bypass be built when every field is plastered with notices announcing that trespassers will be persecuted, as the small boy so aptly paraphrased the notice? Ritual, with its symbolic enactment of the cosmic drama, that's what makes a ritual, by the way. She also said that in Tatwashuddhi. Swami Satchasangas. Oh my God. Satya-sang. Ay caramba. Satya-sang Anandi. Fuck it, I gotta go see. Can't get these folks' names incorrect like that. There it is. Swami Satya-sang Ananda. There it is. So, from the practical point of view, however, the matter is far from simple in Western countries, where such things receive neither acknowledgement nor sympathy. How then can the bypass be built when every field is plastered with notices announcing that trespassers will be persecuted, as a small boy so aptly paraphrased the notice? Ritual, with its symbolic enactment of the cosmic drama, can go a long way, but cannot go the whole way. It can provide dietary supplements that will enable the undernourished to keep alive, but it will not give the bounding energy of real health. As a means to an end, the symbolic ritual is admirable. As an end in itself, it is a compromise and a makeshift. Better than nothing, but not the genuine article. It cannot, moreover, be worked satisfactorily by those who themselves are obliged to rely on substitutes for life in its fullness. Those who possess fullness of life can meditate can mediate to others by means of ritual. Those who possess fullness of life can mediate to others by means of ritual. But if they themselves suffer from restriction or inhibition of life force, they can no more mediate the cosmic life to those for whose benefit they work a ritual than a starving mother can feed her baby. Oh my. Yeah, that's serious right there. Man cannot live by bread alone. Type beat. So she's making the comparison here to like an actual nutritious meal to surviving off of supplements. Supplements will keep you going, but supplements are not a fully nutritious meal. There's a difference from surviving and thriving. It cannot, moreover, be worked satisfactorily by those who themselves are obliged to rely on substitutes for life in its fullness. Those who possess fullness of life can mediate to others by means of ritual. You got to have fullness of life. But if they themselves suffer from restriction or inhibition of life force, they can no more mediate the cosmic life to those for whose benefit they work a ritual than a starving mother can feed her baby. It is necessary that those who work the rites should themselves know the full function of the four quarters, and are right for those who are so fortunately situated as to be able to achieve this, for they are the true priesthood of nature. I would say to them that the sacramental attitude is the key to life, a sacrament being the outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual power. Ritual, we know, is action, and action becomes ritual when performed with intention. That's a paragraph as well. Come right back to that. As I've pointed out elsewhere in my writings on magic, the contacts with the cosmic forces are picked up mentally by means of the use of symbols on which the imagination dwells, thus building them on the astral. Gave you the whole game plan right there. The mind has to be conditioned to any given abstract symbol before it can be influenced by it. And this conditioning is achieved by presenting the symbol to the mind under impressive ritualistic circumstances so that it is forever after associated in the mind with the emotion of the moment and will consequently call up the emotion whenever it is subsequently seen. Can you think of any symbols in your life that as soon as you see them, it brings up the same raw emotion every time? Can you think of any symbols that have been impressed upon you? I mean, the answer is yes. You just have to think about it for real. Symbols that have been impressed upon you that trigger specific emotions. And imagine if you intentionally created a library of symbols, almost like an internal keyboard that you can press and type out astral sentences to create energetic results, which turn into physical results. Interesting. And I like what you said. The mind, I'll read it again. As I have pointed out elsewhere in my writings on magic, the contacts with the cosmic forces are picked up mentally. And by the way, when she says cosmic forces, she's not talking about elemental forces. The elemental forces are the Malkuth, the earth contacts, right? The four elements. Those are the elemental forces. Now, on the opposite pole are the cosmic forces. These are not Malkuth. These are coming from beyond Malkuth. So the contacts with the cosmic forces are picked up mentally by means of the use of symbols on which the imagination dwells, thus building them on the astral. The mind has to be conditioned to any given abstract symbol before it can be influenced by it. So either you're being conditioned or you're conditioning yourself. But it's conditioning happening. Oh, so you're doing the conditioning. The mind has to be conditioned to any given abstract symbol before it can be influenced by it. And this conditioning is achieved by presenting the symbol to the mind under impressive ritualistic circumstances so that it is forever after associated in the mind with the emotion of the moment and will consequently call up the emotion whenever it is subsequently seen. Romulus says, rainbows, and I manifest them every time it rains. Sends me into pure euphoria. Awesome. Awesome. Where's my unicorn pen? There it is. No abstract and artificial symbols, such as the cross or the crescent, can ever become so potent to stir the emotions, nor stir them to such an intensity as the natural objects of feeling. It is for this reason that the church superimposes a tortured figure of the Redeemer upon the bleak, abstract symbol of the cross. Man, you're talking about some programming. That's a good one right there. We need you all to focus on this cross. But since it's so far removed from your human experience, you're not going to do it. So let's put the tortured and suffering Savior on that cross. That way, whenever you see it, you will have an emotional reaction, a definite, sharp, deep, unchangeable emotional reaction, while remembering the symbol of the cross at the same time. At the cross, where I first saw the light. Nice, nice. It is for this reason that the church superimposes the tortured figure of the Redeemer upon the bleak abstract symbol of the cross and offers for our adoration the mother nursing her child. It is probably for the same psychological reason, though reversed, that Muhammad forbade all representation of natural objects in art, so that the faithful might never be led away from the strict monotheism he came to teach. The great nature worshipping religions, however, avail themselves of the power of the natural emotion stirring objects with a directness of appeal that is not appreciated by the sophisticated Westerner, accustomed to the viewpoint inculcated by an ascetic faith. It is indisputable that there are drawbacks to the unrestricted use of powerful stimulants, and civilized countries have found it necessary to control their use, whether in the form of drugs and alcohol or of psychological stimulants to the imagination. A stimulant is not a food, it is, on the contrary, simply a releaser of inhibitions, which enables reserves of energy to be made available. It is a very useful thing to be able to call upon one's reserves in an emergency, and may make all the difference between life and death, success and failure. But in order to be able to call upon one's reserves, one must have reserves to call upon. And this cannot be if one's constantly drawing upon them by the habitual use of stimulants. Dang. Now that's one way to put it. That's one way to put it. Maybe you're not supposed to be releasing your inhibitions. Maybe they're inhibited for a reason. For this reason, in the West, the sale of alcohol was restricted to certain hours in certain places, and psychological stimulants to the instincts were banned whenever recognized as such, though many passed unrecognized. Christianity, by denying the right of life to the instincts and banning their stimulation, has undoubtedly made a vital contribution to culture by forcing a sublimation of primitive energies and interests into social channels. Unquestionably, such a reform was due and overdue in the pagan world to which our Lord came. But there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, and this our religious zealots are never able to realize. And no one who is in a position to form an opinion on the subject has any doubt whatever that we are suffering with our nerves today, owing to the over earnestness of St. Paul and St. Augustine some 20 centuries ago. What India needs is a restriction in the hours and places for the display of psychological stimulants so that her people may have energy to spare for the tasks of civilization. Ooh. Instead of draining themselves dry through the natural channels. And what Anglo-Saxon civilization needs is a realization that prohibition is an unworkable substitute for public house reform. It must not be thought by this that I regard what has euphemistically been termed the poor man's club as any real substitute for the home. On the contrary, It is in the homes that reform should come. And if it comes there, it will not be needed elsewhere. That is the real solution of the problem of psychological prohibition. Whoa. Yeah, that last part most certainly puts a different spin on things in regards to like drugs and alcohol. Especially that last part, right? What India needs is a restriction in the hours and places for the display of psychological stimulants, right? In the same way that she talked about how, you know, alcohol and things of that nature releases these inhibitions, yet people need some of that pent up energy just in case, right? Or for certain things. But if it's all released, there won't be any left for when it's needed. Likewise, if you have a culture of psychological stimulants, there won't be any energy to spare for the task of civilization. Looking at it from that angle, I don't know, it kind of puts a few things in perspective as far as like how different world powers rose and fall, and looking at the spiritual culture of the nations that were conquered versus the nations that were doing the conquering, right? Back with the Hakmabina. Well, we're just getting started. Just getting started. We didn't even get to the roast beef yet. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. I hope that you had a thought sparked in your head and you got something to look up and research on your own. We will most certainly do this again and again and again. There's a lot of chapters in this book, so who knows? I might pop up on a weekday. But in any case, I invite you to this study chamber. If you click the link that's in the description, you can see if this will be the right move for you. If not, keep it moving. But I think that it would be useful to be able to have a place to discuss these things. All right, so that's it. Thank you all so much for being here. Yeah, good stuff. Till next time. Oh wait, let's look at the rest of this. I'm so ready to go to sleep. Ritual is a workaround. When the natural current of the etheric body is obstructed by repression, ritual provides a structured, symbolic pathway to consciously redirect and release accumulated energy, bypassing ingrained mental blockages. Ritual's operative impact: it organizes energy, it synchronizes minds, it channels force. Organizes, synchronizes, channels. Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. Ritual is not tradition, it is technology. Technology. Remember, none of this stuff is hocus pocus guesswork. Of course, the common folk will say that and think that, and that's fine. They must think that. There's actually a science to this. It's a science to this thing. Because we are dealing with patterns, not guessing. Rituals of technology, especially if you know it, right? Because how many of us have done rituals not knowing what the hell we were doing? We had a hope and a dream and a prayer and crossed fingers and a candle and some incense and a sigil scribbled on a piece of paper, right? And that can work because there are all sorts of unspoken elements. But when you start to understand the structure, when you start to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, well, you'll start to see that it's very clearly a technology that we're dealing with. Ritual is clearly a technology. And something else was brought up too. Don't limit ritual to you standing in front of a candle, or wearing a robe and holding a sword and, you know, repeating some words out of a book. That's not the limit of what a ritual is. We all perform rituals all the time, all day, every day. You've got personalized rituals that keep your state and your psyche balanced. You've got rituals that keep your elemental forces balanced and harmonized. So recognize the rituals that you're already performing and look at how they work and why they work. Look at the rituals that you're already doing on a daily basis that sustain your life, who you are and how you are. And that should start to give you a clue on how to do other types of ritual. Right? Right? All night long, all night. Group ritual is amplified circuit. Amplified circuit. When individuals consciously align their etheric fields through shared ritual, the combined energetic output is significantly greater than the sum of its parts. This amplification transforms individual effort into a collective force. Synchronized intent, harmonic resonance, and energetic feedback. Why people fail. The primary obstacles to conscious manifestation often stem from three fundamental failures. What are those three fundamental failures? Number one, misunderstanding symbols. The inability to decode the deeper layers of meaning within symbolic language leads to literal interpretations. Literal when it should be metaphorical or subjective. The second one is repressing energy. The suppression of natural impulses causes energetic stagnation and accumulation of distorted etheric current. Distorted etheric current. And the third is lacking structure. You've heard me say this before. You heard me talk about this before. The absence of coherent frameworks or rituals to effectively channel intent and direct energy often results in chaos. Act like you know. Act like you know, because you do. You know that if you turn that screw, righty tighty, lefty loosey. There's no guessing. There's only doing. Power isn't missing, the system is. So make sure that whatever you're doing, you're building a system for yourself. Because what I'm seeing and what I'm seeing over the years with this magic and these rituals and these understandings, it doesn't, nothing is true. Everything is permitted. What's important is that you have a system that you work from. So that means that every piece has to point to something. Remember how she talked about a certain symbol can trigger a certain emotion, and that emotion influences your state, and your state influences your behavior. So quite literally, symbols program your reality. Now, do you live in a reality full of symbols that you didn't program? You should have a system that you understand without having to logicalize it, to rationalize it. You should have a system that is integrated with how you move and breathe without thinking about it, right? Autopilot. That's when the game starts playing back with you. See, there's a certain way to play with the simulation. At first, you're following rules and nature's following rules and everything's following the rules of the game. But after a while, after tinkering and tampering and setting a few patterns up yourself, the game starts responding to your patterns. The game starts to make room for what you've created. It doesn't care. It adapts. That's what nature does. Nature adapts. So give her something to adapt to. Or not. Or not. It's your choice. I'm telling you something real. If you don't like the patterns that are going on, tinker with some symbols and attach them to some emotions, or take what you already got going on and swap some wires around. Use intention as a directive, as a steering wheel. Intention is a steering wheel, but you still have to make the move, do the work, as Brother Panic used to say. Set your intention and do the work. Meditate and do your ritual with knowledge. Power isn't missing, the system is. So when we get back into this, next we're going to talk about how the current actually moves. We're going to talk more about the goddess. We're going to talk more about the Greek Dionysus and all this other stuff. Hopefully you've already purchased this book. You got a physical copy and you can read it yourself, because with or without me, this text is very illuminating. Very illuminating. And if you are a practicing magic person, it would behoove you to study this work. Aleph says, could meditating be the ritual? Sure, right? Sure. But what do those words mean? Like, I made a distinction just now between meditate and do the ritual, right? I made the distinction between meditate and do the ritual. So if I made that distinction, I am pointing at two different types of experience. If we want to distill it, we could also say study and practice, right? There's study and there's practice. One is inward and one is outward. Make sure, when you go to the gym, you don't exercise one leg. You don't pump them weights with one leg. That would be a crazy sight. 5 years of working on one leg. Okay. Have a good night, everyone. Joy Empress. Peace and greetings. Good to see you. All right. Well, back into the shadow realm where time does not pass. At least it doesn't seem like it does. I'll see you guys next time. The cycle turns. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you. Peace.